So if I'm shipping lithium batteries from the United States to anywhere else in the world, unless we're talking Canada or Mexico, I'm very, very likely going to be putting those batteries on an ocean vessel or putting them on an aircraft. So when you get to like import export, you need to think about global dangerous goods regulations. If I'm shipping something from, Chicago over to Europe, if I'm putting it on an aircraft, at that point, I'm going to need to be in compliance with the ICAO technical instructions or the IATA dangerous goods regulations. We don't need to get into the specifics of the difference there, but just think about the IATA dangerous goods regulations as the standard that you need to meet to ship hazardous materials, including lithium batteries, by air. So if you're going to be putting a lithium battery on an aircraft, it's the IATA regulations that are going to go through what type of packaging you need to use, what type of label needs to go on the package, what type of shipping paperwork you need to fill out. So all that information is going to be done at the IATA dangerous goods level. Fortunately, it's very similar to what we have here in the United States. We try to get regulations harmonized to a point that, I should say I'm not necessarily writing these rules. They don't want to make it extremely difficult to ship hazardous materials globally. So something that's a Class 9 lithium battery here in the US is a Class 9 lithium battery in Canada. It's a Class 9 lithium battery in Europe. So oftentimes the packaging, labeling, documentation requirements are very similar between different countries. Of course, there's always going to be differences, but for the most part, what we're attempting to do is to have a harmonized system whereby it makes the free flow of hazardous materials a little bit easier to ship because we don't have every single country coming up with their own standards. So for air transport, IATA dangerous goods regulations. For ocean transport, similar concept, but we would need to use the regulations found in the IMDG code, so the International Maritime Dangerous Goods Code. And like I talked about with air transport, a lot of it is very similar in terms of if you're shipping something, for example, by road here in the US, specifically lithium batteries. If you're shipping lithium batteries by road here in the US, the requirements to ship them by ocean under the IMDG code internationally are very, very similar in terms of packaging, labeling, and documentation. So the big thing when you're doing import-export is understanding which regulations apply to your modes of transport. So as I mentioned, air transport, IATA dangerous goods regulations, ocean transport, the IMDG code. And then layered on top of that, once the battery hits the ground in France, they have a European code for transportation of dangerous goods called the ADR standard. So you need to make sure that the package is also going to be in compliance with the ADR requirements for transport of dangerous goods by highway within Europe. So there's a lot of different regulations that you need to, kind of simultaneously meet. But as I've mentioned twice at least already, things are relatively well harmonized. So if your package is one that's in compliance for air transport, it's very likely once it hits the ground is going to also be in compliance with highway transport to its destination in Europe. So from the export side, it's about managing different regulations. The import side here in the United States, very similar concept. So if you're an international company and now we're shipping whatever that was from France back to the United States, we also would package it in accordance with the IATA regulations for air, the IMDG regulations for ocean. There's a couple extra notes, I suppose, when it comes to importing hazardous materials into the United States. One of the kind of key components is in the USA, the hazmat regulations here in the 49 CFR, they do require that you as the recipient inform whoever your supplier is of the regulations. So there's a paragraph or two in the regulations about the importation of hazardous material, and it puts some small but some level of burden on the actual person importing that material into the United States to say, if you are the importer, so if you're requesting these batteries being flown to you from China, from Hong Kong, from Taiwan, that you need to work with your Chinese counterpart to say, you cannot ship me these batteries unless they are properly marked, labeled, documented for transport. It doesn't necessarily require you to go over there to do an inspection on every package or to actually complete the shipping preparation. That's not the level that we're involved with here, but it's more of a kind of a reasonable care thing where you need to work with suppliers to make sure that they understand how to package lithium batteries, how to label lithium batteries, how to document those shipments, because we want to make sure that those batteries are moved safely. So there's a little bit of an extra import requirement here in the US, given by DOT, to say that you need to inform any sort of foreign parties about the regulations. The other aspect is there's a little bit tighter control here in the United States around prototype lithium batteries. So, well, there's a little tighter restriction here in the US on both prototype batteries and the big batteries over 35 kilograms. This is going to be specifically important to electric vehicles. So typically, if you're using the IATA regulations and you want to ship either a prototype battery or a battery that weighs more than 35 kilograms, you need approval from the government of the country of origin, which is the country where it's first being loaded onto an aircraft. You also need approval from the government that certifies the air carrier. The US is a little different because they add a third leg here, is to say that any battery over 35 kg going by air, or any prototype battery going by air, if it's going to, from, or within the United States, you also need US government approval, which comes through PHMSA, Pipeline and Hazmat Safety Administration, in the form of a special permit. So most countries don't have that. So what I mean by that is if I wanted to ship let's just say an EV battery, which is going to be way more than 35 kilograms. If I want to ship an EV battery on a plane, I need to get DOT approval to ship it on the plane. And I also need to get the DOT approval covers the state of origin. So let's say it's leaving from Wisconsin going to France. It also covers the state of the operator if I'm using an American carrier, but there's no requirement on the other end for me to interact with the French government to get that approval. So you can ship things out of the United States relatively easily, but on the flip side, this is where it gets a little more tightly controlled, is if I'm shipping it from France here to the US, I need approval from the French government, because that's the country of origin. That's where it's first being loaded onto the aircraft. I need approval of the country certifying the operator. And if that battery is going to, from, or within the United States, I also need to get DOT approval. So that's a little bit of an extra requirement for importers. So think about from the import side, if you are importing batteries, and I haven't looked at the latest stats, but I'm pretty sure the vast majority of lithium cells in the world are being produced in Asia. So if you are importing lithium batteries, lithium cells, you're likely importing them from a different country, in which case you need to make sure that the supplier that you're getting them from is aware of these safety regulations for transport. Since lithium batteries have been around and pretty common here for the last decade or more, most of the suppliers, know what they're doing. There's a ton of highly reputable suppliers located all over the world that are very familiar with packaging, labeling, documenting. They know all about safe transport of lithium batteries. But if you are importing lithium batteries into the United States, you do have that obligation to make sure that your supplier is knowledgeable about these rules and is going to follow these rules. So if failure to follow these rules can certainly kind of blow back on you in terms of enforcement. It can blow back on your company in terms of you're not getting the batteries that you ordered. So you want to make sure that we always are keeping that transport safety side in focus, even from packages that you're not preparing, but that you're actually importing here into the USA.